Good morning, friends. This is Pastor Carol Jeunnette, interim pastor at Lord of Life Lutheran Church in Kenosha, Wisconsin. I hope you're doing well on this beautiful but somewhat chilly and windy morning. It's hard to believe that we're already well into May. Today, May 8th, is a day for remembering several things. I hadn't realized until I turned the news on this morning that today is VE Day, Victory in Europe. It's the day that World War II ended in Europe with the unconditional surrender of Germany. A comment was made in the news report that a war is not truly over until the last surviving veteran dies. At this point, according to the report, there are 400 surviving veterans of that war. I give thanks to God for them. Early in this pandemic, early in our safer at home time, I kept thinking about Great Britain during World War II. There are lots of British books and movies and TV programs with these stories, and the theme that intrigues me is how people, most of the time, work together. I know I'm probably a romantic, and people being people, not everyone paid attention to the bigger picture of well-being for all. But it seems that there was a spirit that said we need to continue to care for each other and stretch beyond our comfort levels in order to help the world return to a better place. My hope and prayer is that we, the people of the world today, can also work together toward well-being for all during this challenging time. Now for a pretty rough segue to another challenging time, and the theme I wanted to talk about today. This is 14th century England. In the church, May 8th is the day that we remember and give thanks to God for Julian of Norwich. Julian was an anchoress, an anchorite, in the city of Norwich, which is about 100 miles northeast of England, or of London. The word anchorite comes from a Greek word that means one who is retired or withdrawn from the world, and it's for a religious purpose. An anchoress would live in an anchorage. Traditionally, that was a small cell, one room, that had 3 windows and no door. One window opened to the church, where the anchoress could hear daily mass. Another window opened into a servant's quarters, so all the daily needs were taken care of through that. The third window would open onto a small porch, and through the window here, the anchoress would receive visitors. Now, the primary duty of the anchoress was to pray for the people of the parish, both living and dead. But she would also act as a counselor, hearing people's stories and offering advice. Well, before she was an anchoress, at the age of 30, Julian was so ill that she and those around her were sure she was dying. Now, in this illness, this mysterious illness, Christ appears to her in the passion of his crucifixion, and over several hours, through 16 revelations or showings, Christ revealed to her the mystery of his compassion. Now, this is the way it's described by Amy Frickholm in a book, Julian of Norwich. Shortly after Julian recovered from her illness, she wrote about this mystical experience. And then years and years later, she again wrote about the visions. This time, she'd had a lot more time to think about it, to pray about it, to be in contact with more people. And this was a much longer text with deep theological reflection. This book, called Revelations of Divine Love, is the first book written in English by a woman. And it's amazing that it has been preserved in some form over all of these centuries. Julian was alive during the time of the Black Death in Europe, which may have killed over half of the population of her city. The Peasants' Revolt, a horribly bloodied war, and that happened in 1381, also happened during her lifetime. She lived with war, with pandemic, and Julian challenged God with all of this. Julian challenged God with the reality of a suffering world. Now, in one of my earlier contemplations, at least one of them, possibly more, I used Julian's words, "All shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well." What I learned in my study about Julian for today's contemplation is that these are not just Julian's words to people who are reading and listening to her. These are God's words to Julian in response to Julian presenting God with all of the things in the world that are not well. God doesn't explain how things would be made well, but God invited Julian to trust in a future of wellness. For us, saying all shall be well is more than a simple act of devotion, although it's that. And it's more than kind of a trick to calm our minds down, although I've used it as that as well. I think the saying all shall be well is really an invitation to live more trustingly, to live with more trust in God in the midst of suffering and fear and challenge, to live trusting that God saying all shall be well is true. Think about it. I mean, it's one thing to think that, but if we actually live and act and relate in this kind of confidence that all shall be well, I think that makes a difference. So, as we tie up this week, as I look forward to cleaning out my fish pond tomorrow and being with you in drop-in groups on Saturday evening, tomorrow evening, and on Sunday, I hope that your weekend is one that is good, that is peaceful, and that you can really live in trusting in God's words. All shall be well. Peace to you, my friends.